Hello, this is Kevin Collins with Home Theater Forum at CEDIA 2013. We're here at the JVC Professional booth with Gary, and we're going to talk about some of the features of their new top-of-the-line JVC product. Gary, one of the things that has always been known in our community and for myself about JVC is the incredible contrast ratio and the deep blacks. What are some of the things that have happened with this new release of the top-of-the-line JVC above the previous ones that you've done to improve that key feature that JVC has always been known about?
So yes, native contrast, we've been the leader in the industry for many years on that. This year we've made several improvements again, increasing the native contrast ratio of the top-of-the-line products to 150,000 to 1. And that's a result primarily of a new wire grid polarizer and the projector itself, and also in a new device that we've created, a 6th generation DILA device with a much narrower gap between the pixels. So that helps us create a more reflective surface, so we get about a 10% light gain there. We also get less light scatter because of the gap reduction, and that helps us improve the native contrast ratio.
Well, that's a pretty incredible contrast ratio. One of the things I was in the press event that you had that you're talking about, which was kind of confusing to me, was the dynamic aperture. And always, one of the things that we always thought, well, it was kind of a fact that JVC was so good at, is that you did not have to have an aperture reduction, particularly for scenes like Star Wars and stuff like that, or black scenes where you had stars. How does a dynamic aperture play to that as still a benefit for JVC and what you're doing?
Well, this year we've employed an intelligent lens aperture, and this is actually done in the projection lens itself, where we slightly control the aperture. So when you start out with a very high native contrast, your black is already pretty black. So to make it a little bit blacker, you don't have to move the iris very much to decrease the black level. As compared to other technologies, if they start out at 5 or 10,000 to 1 native contrast, they have to do a lot of iris or aperture correction in order to make that black go out to 300,000 or 600,000 to 1. So our method allows us to go out on the top of the line products to a 1.5 million to 1 dynamic contrast. And again, it's just a gentle kind of aperture correction in the projection lens itself. So we don't have to work that hard to make the blacks a lot blacker. So it's not this pumping type of sequence where the whites are on. So we end up maintaining a lot more efficiency in that process. So there's more white light on the screen compared to other methods of doing dynamic contrast.
Obviously, one of the big things at the show, and one of the key things that you guys even had last year, was 4K technology. So you have a bunch of upgrades that you talked about this year for 4K technology, particularly with this projector. Can you walk us through what was different from last year in 4K to this year in 4K?
Sure. I'll talk about the projector first in terms of what we've done inside the projector. So we implemented eShift technology 3 years ago. So we're now in our 3rd generation of eShift technology in this model. We've also added native 4K inputs, so we can do the DCI standard 4096 by 2160 input. We can also do the TV standard of 3840 by 2160 input, 4K at 60p at 420. So we've got the native 4K inputs on the machine, the new eShift 3 processor, and then part of that eShift is what we call our multi-pixel control circuit. So last year we would input a 2K signal, and we had to upscale that to 3840 by 2160. This year, since we can take a native 4K input, we skipped that process of upscaling. We already have a 3840 by 2160 frame, and then we just simply divide that into 2 subframes at 1920 by 1080. And those are projected sequentially on the screen at 120 hertz. So that's what we're doing new this year in terms of 4K eShift 3.
Obviously, there's not a lot of native 4K content out there. So, one of the advantages that you'd want to do is you have an existing Blu-ray library. What are some of the benefits that you would get, on a Blu-ray library going through your 4K projector, and how does that work?
Well, something that happens in any time you do a video process, and much like in audio where you have an amplifier that goes plus or minus 3 dB. You have that same type of thing in video. So there's always roll-off toward the upper end of this frequency spectrum. Well, Blu-ray gives us a very wide-band source to be able to play back very high-frequency information. So by having the eShift3 processor, we're able to detect those higher bandwidths, and you've actually got a resolution in the projector that exceeds the bandwidth of the 2K spectrum. So now you can retrieve all of that high frequency data, and you can we can manipulate it, we can work on it, we can detect it, sharpen it when it's in the 3840 by 2160 realm, and then output a very high quality Blu-ray signal. So we're picking up details that would be lost in just a standard 2K projector.
Oh, excellent. There was one other point that I saw at the press event that I don't think we covered yet, and that was something around the black levels. And you had something about if you had like a pixel of white, you had a better way of doing black. Can you explain that?
Well, one of the processes that we're doing to increase contrast ratio and make blacks look better and cleaner is a technology that we've applied for a patent for called clear black. So basically, if you had a single white pixel at 100% video, there's going to be the pixels around that would have some adjacent light scatter. So we have the ability to pick up each pixel and kind of look at that and say, okay, here's the light scatter. We apply some correction to it, and then we can display that single pixel with a much cleaner transition from 0 to 100% and back again.
Wow, I'm anxious to get my hands on this projector to see these blacks. I'm always a big fan of blacks. So what's the price on the top of the line RS6710?
So the RS6710 would retail for $12,499.
This is Kevin Collins at CEDIA 2013 at the JVC Professional booth.